just self-expression, which all of this, of course, is, which everything is. And there is an acute awareness that everything is self, that this, which might appear as sharing or speaking to an audience, to another, it's just talking to the self. It's just self-expression. It's just self-speaking to self, consciousness talking to itself. There is, in fact, no other. That's all an illusion. There are no people. There are no other people, certainly. There are no people at all. There is no person here. There is no separation between the self, which perhaps could be called mine in a certain context, and the self that could be called yours. It is all just the same self. And so all one is ever really doing is talking to oneself. That's all this is, all the time. And yet there is a desire for it. There is this powerful desire for that expression, regardless of audience, real or unreal. This desire to self-express, it's at the core of everything. This, to me, it's a challenge to articulate without using some of these words of personalization and personification. But even in using them, there is this awareness. There is no me. Essentially, there is no you. There is our self. There is the self, the one self, the one same consciousness that is shared, that is all. This is therapeutic for me. I'll just put it that way. This is my therapy. I am one who has experienced many therapists over the course of this incarnation, this lifetime, having been previously diagnosed with a myriad of disorders: obsessive compulsive disorder, severe, generalized anxiety, systemic depression, all of these things, heavily medicated for a substantial period of time. And it was in discussion with the last individual who served as a therapist for this self that I came to the realization that all that was needed was self-expression. It's just this withholding of energy, which just wants to express, it wants to flow, and your self is energy. It is the withholding of the self, the holding back of that expression, which creates toxicity, which creates the disorder. If all self simply became aware of this, acknowledged this, and so made it a regular, dedicated, conscious practice to express self in whatever form was desired within that moment, whatever arose as a natural and authentic emanation of that energy, the natural expression, then the energy of self and all the swirling other fields of energy within us would not get stuck and would not boil over to this place where it exploded outwards, where it erupted outwards, where it became toxic, where we then had to go to therapy. How wild is it that all we really need to remain balanced and integrated is to express openly, and yet we have created an entire industry, essentially, around developing a singular space in which that open expression is allowed to occur. We have boxed ourselves in so certainly. We have demonized and ostracized the open and natural and authentic expression of self to the extent that we feel we must now pay an individual to listen to us speak freely. And really, that's all it is. How many times do you really even need or want the advice of another versus just wanting to unload, wanting to unburden, to confess? Because confession is expression. It is the expression of something that has been held in, something that has been judged as somehow inappropriate or incorrect for being there, and yet it is there. But because of ego's judgment of it as inappropriate, insufficient, incorrect, it's withheld. And it is the withholding of that emotion, that truth, that expression, that then turns it toxic, makes us sick, creates all of these other disordered behaviors. And all of that is alleviated with the simple expression of it, which we then at this point would call a confession, because of all of this unnecessary layered shame and guilt around it, because of how deeply it's been repressed. We have made this into the norm. The repression of expression, to the point that it becomes confession. It's absolutely absurd. It is demonstrative of the delusional, disordered, insane thinking of the mind, the insane operation of the ego. It is absolutely bonkers, backwards, out of touch with reality. And so it is my desire, and this became clear in sessions with the last therapist that I ever spoke to, that all that was really desired, all that was really necessary for my energy to come back into balance, for me to start feeling better, was to openly express myself, was to speak what was within me, within my heart, freely, truly, honestly. And thus began this endeavor. That's when I started recording videos. Sure, some other things happened. I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. I hesitate to even give it labels at this point because they're really just distracting and irrelevant. Perhaps it was Kundalini, perhaps it was not, something else entirely. All I know is my entire experience of life and consciousness shifted dramatically from one day to the next. I became very physically unwell from certain perspectives. I did not go to a hospital. I briefly considered it. I thought I might be dying. In fact, I was fairly sure of it, but I didn't care. Something inside of me just said, this is right. Just accept it. Go with it. Don't fight it. I had no concept of Kundalini at the time. I didn't know what that was. I was unaware of soul recognition, the whole twin flame thing, another label that I no longer really desire to apply to anything, just because, like most labels, like most words, it's become convoluted. It's vibrationally tangled, very much like the God label itself. You can say the word God and 50 people will have 50 different understandings of what you're talking about. So leave that off. Sometimes it still comes forth that way because there's a desire to reclaim that word, and it is just a word. It is a pointer. It's really a concept, but God is not God. God is a word. The experience of the unmanifested, the experience of source, of divine, of spirit, whatever word you want to attach to it, is the experience of it, besides the point. All of this to say, all any of us really want or need is open, earnest, honest self-expression. And in the practice of that, we own our energy. We come to realize through direct experience that it is not another person, another thing, another experience that makes us feel anything. It is wholly within our own power. If we're not feeling so great, we're withholding energy. We are holding on to something that wants to flow, that wants to express. Very likely we are holding on to it in tandem with the utilization, the alignment with a warped perspective. A perspective that is not of the true self. A perspective that is out of alignment with reality itself. And that's why it feels so bad. If you think a thought that creates an emotional sensation that feels awful, that is your evidence that thought is not true. It's false. That's why it hurts. That very thought and your alignment with it, your alignment of consciousness, which is your perspective, with it, is the divergence of yourself from yourself. You can't actually be separate from self. That's not possible. But you have sort of split the stream of your energy and wrapped around and created this resistance by your identification with a mind-created perspective, an egoic-created perspective that is illusion, and it is false. And it is known to be false by your highest self, by yourself. You are seeing, your highest self is seeing the truth, but you have split off from that in such a way that has gotten you balled up against the truth of reality. And in your holding of that perspective, your thinking of that thought and feeling of that uncomfortable emotion, that is your indication by the sensation you are experiencing, how on point you are with actual reality, with the truth, how close you are perceiving to the truth. The more it hurts, the further away from the truth you are. And that's not a bad thing. That's an important thing. That is a wonderful thing to know. This hurts so much because it's incorrect. So where do I go from here? Now you take that information and you apply it. And you have the chance to correct your deviation from the true perspective. Perhaps you are looking the exact opposite direction. It hurts a lot to do that. You feel it. When you face that feeling of pain, of discomfort, of grief, suffering, whatever it is, because you have to acknowledge that it's there. This is where we've all gone quite wickedly astray. Instead of covering up that sensation, ignoring it, running from it, hiding it with substance, with some sort of experience, running from it by running to another. I'm going to wrap back around to this. Instead of running from it, you face it, you express it, you feel it, you come to the realization, this hurts so much because it is pointing to the falseness of the perspective that has created it. So now let me backtrack, let me step back into this perspective and see what is the thought that I thought that created this uncomfortable sensation. Now I know this thought is incorrect. It's untrue. It is a lie. And from here, I can move directly to the opposite. What's the opposite of this thought? If the thought is death is final, it is the end, it's the end of me, it is the end of all things, and you feel the discomfort of that, you can know the opposite of that thought is true. And now you just turn around. You face the other way. You face the light and move into it. You reconnect yourself with yourself. The energy is now flowing freely again. You are in alignment. You feel the wholeness of your being. And you're good. And you feel good. So even therapy, which I am not speaking against, not remotely, it's fascinating to me because it is demonstrative of this process which we are capable of engaging in wholly on our own, because ultimately that's still what's happening. The illusion of therapist is what is so fascinating to me. There are no other people. And even in the role of therapist, it's recognized that you're not there as a therapist to really even be another person. You are there to hold space. You are there to be the non-reactive and reflective surface for another. This is what all of us can do, can practice for ourselves, can practice for one another. It does not take clinical training to do this. I'm not speaking against that either. Just saying this is so natural. This is the natural mechanism of consciousness. This is the natural expression of self, the growth and development of self, to come to this realization that what you are is space, what you are is consciousness, that you are most authentically yourself and feeling your best when you are that. You are the space. You are pure being. When you relinquish and release all other labels, all characterization, when you cease the identification with the mind-made self, which we call ego, all of these things, then you are feeling your best, you are flowing with ease and grace through life, and you are demonstrating that for all else. And if there is another who is seeking to learn this, who is just starting out, or some other place on this path, because we are all on the same path, we are all walking one another home. You then get to be the one to hold space for them, to demonstrate that, to be the way shower as you're way which you now walk and practice was shown to you by another consciousness, another of yourself, holding that space, being a non-person, holding the space for your open expression by the intense and acute awareness that they are not a person, they are space, they are presence, they are awareness, they are the witness. And so it's not really any wonder that we pay people to do this, because this is an ego-created society, an ego-driven world. And so those who have learned how to practice presence, how to hold space, essentially, how to be consciousness with nothing added on top, have historically been few and far between. That is changing. And that is a part of the ascension of humanity and the evolution of all consciousness. And so there will come a time, not that distant from now, where the therapeutic practice becomes everyday practice. And the practice is performed for the self, by the self, with the awareness that this is all that is necessary, that even when one is going to a therapist, it's just to talk to yourself. That's the whole point. We've just created these little spaces where it feels safe to do such a thing. It's time for all of the world to be that space, to perceive all of the world as safe to express within. That is the goal. That is the intention that I hold for all of existence, all of this space, which is safe, to be perceived as such, and for the open expression of self to take place anywhere and any time, not in a constructed environment, not because it is deemed appropriate or socially acceptable by some other standards, all of them egoic. No. To leave all of that behind, to recognize space is everywhere, and all space is safe. This is a realization of consciousness as it comes to understand itself, comes to be aware of its spacious nature, for being to recognize what being is space. What being is stillness, not the forms within, but the space within which the forms are contained and allowed. When it is perceived and realized that this level of reality, it's not the base, it's not perhaps as real as we would define it to be. Oh, it exists at this level in the same way that a video game exists. It's real. But is it the base? Does it really affect anything? It can come and go, and reality is unchanged. Same with this level. The existence of video games within this level of reality is demonstrative of this truth. It's built in to the framework of the universe. This is just another level of it. And so there is a higher order, higher dimension in which being, the self, emanates from. And that is the true reality. And that reality, as this one is untouched by the goings-on of a video game, the true reality is untouched by the goings-on of this. There's nothing serious happening here. There's nothing even really happening at all. The same way there's nothing really happening when you play a game. It's all just images on a screen. That's this. Images on a screen. It's a very clever illusion, absolutely. But even at the deepest level, we can see there's nothing really here but space. Nothing is actually touching. Between every molecule, between every particle, there's a gap. There is space. There's energy there. There is magnetism, electromagnetism, but nothing is actually touching. Everything that is just a bunch of space reflecting light in such a way that it appears to have a shape, it appears to have a texture, it appears to have form. It's all because of perception. There's nothing really here. No people, no things, nothing scary, nothing actually even going on. It's all just presence. It is all just being. And this is experienceable. This is comprehensible, not by mind, but by consciousness, that which all of this is. When you become conscious of your being, you become conscious of the being of all. And you see that that is essentially all there is. Being. That's it. And you can feel it is the same being. No difference between. There is not this being and that being. There's just being. My being and experience of it is the same as the being of everything we would say is in this room. And then you can feel, in fact, that the room itself is being. And you can become aware, as Eckhart Tolle often points out, and this is a wonderful practice, you can become aware of the space being. That in fact, this room would not be room without the space. That is in fact what makes it room. Yes? And so shifting the awareness from the being of form to the being of the space, you become aware of how alive that space is. And then you become aware that that is you. That is your true being. You are the space. Everything that is expressing within that space is an emanation of self, yes. But it is not your true essential nature. What you truly are is that which is receiving, that which is allowing. There is the voice within your head, or sometimes emanating from the body. There is the voice, and there is that which is hearing the voice. And it is hearing the voice as it is speaking. Curiously enough, it is absolutely present and aware. It is listening, it is hearing, it is observing, it is the witness. Can you feel how there is voice and there is listener? One of them is truer than the other. One of them exists even when the other one does not. Even when there is not a voice, there is still something listening. That is you. That is consciousness. That is who and what you are. The voiceless, formless, characteristic-less essence, pure consciousness, pure awareness, pure being, pure life. You can feel the aliveness of it. In fact, how much more alive it is when it is not burdened by any attachment. When it is still, when it is quiet, when it is just space. Space aware of itself, stillness aware of itself. It's very peaceful there. And the awareness of this place, of the essential nature of self, can be held inclusive of all else, all of the form, of which speaking is one, all of the form that is within that space. And that is what holding space is, holding the awareness, truly, holding the awareness of self, releasing all identification with anything else, not with any form, mental, physical, emotional. Being aware and living fully as the observer, as life, as consciousness, as the witness, as the still open space which you are. Being fully aware, that is what you are. And holding that in your awareness, allowing all else to be as it is. We are to discover how this may be done for the self. It's happening right now. You can be the witness of yourself, the witness of your own free expression, allowing your own energy to rise, to emerge in whatever form it desires to take. Open to the form, receptive to the form, just not attached to it, not identified with it, aware the entire time. This is an expression of self, but what my self is that which is witnessing the expression. So nothing becomes so serious. Nothing is really personal. Nothing matters. Everything is sacred. Everything is honored and appreciated fully, truly, by this. But it doesn't matter. It's because it doesn't matter that you're able to honor it fully. So it is. This is all the delightful expression of self. For the sake of the expression, for the sake of that self, which seeks only to express because it desires to. And there is a knowing that this is the practice. This is the practice for all consciousness. In showing this and demonstrating this, we are leading consciousness to the understanding that this is how we remain in balance. This is how we remain in flow. This is how we do it as divine deliberate creators. This is how we remain integrated with the whole of self and in balance and in touch with the flow of life. This is how we stay in providence, allowing all things to move with ease and grace. And in demonstrating this, this is how we call all consciousness into this state, into this practice, this realm. And so we will freely express to our own selfish delight, for the desire of it, for the selfish benefit of it. Is it for all consciousness? Yes, but all consciousness is our consciousness. And it is the direct personal experience of it through which this must be expressed. We are restricted to a lens at this level of reality. This is the lens. And so it must be done selfishly through this lens in order to be in true alignment with the whole of self. But that's it. That is really it. All that is ever needed is free expression. And we perceive the entirety of the earthly realm as the free, safe place in which this expression shall occur. It already is. Again, that's what all of this is. It is simply the desire to demonstrate this in a more pointed way in order to encourage it within all consciousness. Just open up. Just express. Relieve yourself of the confines of socially acceptable modes and environments of expression. See that that is just a fear-based construct created by ego. It is just ego that feels afraid, that feels threatened by the open expression in the open world. See that it is only ever ego that could be diminished. It is only ever ego that could be threatened. And ego is nothing. Ego is not you. It's an illusion. It's not real. Let it be diminished. Let it be threatened. Let it feel its own demise or destruction. That's okay. Doesn't mean anything. It's not real. Let the small self perish. It is all to the benefit of you, that which you truly are. So it is. This is the conclusion of this expression. There is nothing more we desire to say at this moment. But it has been very satisfying and will continue to be. So it is. The expression of self is all that is truly desired. And it is that which is wholly within one's own power and control at any given moment. Express freely, feel freely, embody that which you truly are, the space, the conscious witness, the observer. Witness the ego itself in its wriggling and writhing against. That's okay. You're not identified with it. There's no resistance if you're not identified with it. Resistance lives in the ego. You don't have to eliminate that resistance. You can just stop identifying. You can get off that train and let it run wild. Oh, let it roll straight off the cliff. It's no matter to you. It's no threat to you. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. So let the open expression commence. We are eager and excited to bear witness to all of it. And we are forever holding this space of pure awareness, pure appreciation, and pure love of exactly that which is, and exactly that which you are in this moment. You could never be anything less than perfect. There is great love for all, here and now, which is eternal. So it is.